Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Bissett. Derek, we've had the return of MLR and the start of the Six Nations, so what else could you have gotten up to over this weekend?
Nothing. There was literally not a single ounce of time for anything else other than the Six Nations in the morning, and then it was great to have MLR back. It was a very exciting opening weekend. Some really fun results, some surprising upsets. It was just a phenomenal weekend all around. Obviously, maybe not the best start to the season, or not the start to the season that the Arrows were hoping for. Definitely not the start to Six Nations your Welsh were hoping for, but you can't, in all the excitement of Christmas morning, or I guess the start of the Six Nations MLR season, I guess you can't have it all necessarily.
I think my mindset is, if there's ever going to be a time where you want to be, on the back foot or trying new things or getting your groove back, it's always at the start. Or in Wales's case, it's the year prior to a World Cup, as my Irish listeners know all too well, that you don't want to peak the year before World Cup. You want to peak just as the Six Nations 2023 is starting, and then boom, continuing that stride, right up to the quarterfinal stage. But anyway, let's talk about MLR. And before we talk about the games, we have to talk about a big announcement that came just days before the season kicked off, and that is MLR has confirmed that each match will not only have HIA assessment in line with World Rugby regulations, every game will also have TMO. Now, this is something that we have been begging for, especially last season. I mean, Arrows fans especially, when it was that game against New York down in Atlanta, that very obvious non-grounding forward knock-on was given us a try, and we're just scream. You could hear the screams from Toronto all the way through New York to Atlanta, just saying that. How was that allowed?
Yeah,
now we've got TMO, and great to see it in use.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's definitely a big step up for the league. We saw a couple situations throughout the weekend already where it came into use.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
Sometimes the broadcast kind of showed the replay, sometimes it didn't. But at the end of the day, the people on the field, it's the most important for them to have it. I did love how everyone was so fired up about having TMO until the TMO made a mistake, and everyone's like, "Get rid of the TMO." Just like it will be for every ref. But for the first weekend of running TMO across the league, I thought it went pretty well. The head injury assessment, there's a lot. I saw a handful of players were really, on social media after, were kind of, tagging a lot of that US Rugby Players Association afterwards. So it seems like, the players, which is good, because that seems like, the players are getting a say in the league, which is always good. But also, obviously, HIA and HIA assessments, it's, obviously super important for, the health of the players. So definitely good to see the league bringing in these initiatives, because it does take it up another level. Just having that ability to review key plays. Like you said, it's like we can go back through last season, and there was a bunch of there's tries that should have been tries that weren't. Mm-hmm. There's tries that were there was non-tries that ended up being tries that shouldn't have been. And even there was that bizarre situation too, when LA played Utah at SoFi Stadium, where there was no TMO, but the officials,
it was so obvious you couldn't allow it to happen.
Yeah, the officials were using the screens and stuff, and I think we argued back then that it's like, even though that call was right, maybe shouldn't have been allowed to happen because it's not in line with the rules of the league. But now that TMO is going to be at every game, right? If you do end up playing in venues, because obviously some venues in the league are better than others. So, right. Especially if LA is going to do something like going to SoFi again, but at least all the games from a rules standpoint are played on that even playing field. And, I'm excited to see it happen. And it was good to see it put to use in the first weekend.
Yeah. I think something as well to take note of is that not all the stadiums in MLR have the capabilities of showing the TMO replays to the crowd in attendance. So, for example, Starfire
Oh
Stadium,
yeah, yeah.
they don't have a big screen, for example. I know we know that York Lions does and is able to show it
Yeah.
there, but some of these other stadiums, maybe not. Maybe San Diego's new stadium at the car park will maybe not have that screen because it's an athletic stadium. Talking about San Diego Stadium, that's something we'll get to later. But something else I want to bring up as well, which MLR introduced, is this brand new trade wire. So now every single trade that's happened within MLR between teams, whether it's for players' rights, salary cap space, or an international slot, that has now been revealed. And it goes back as far as the draft for 2021. So we have now a concrete statement of what has been traded and what for, who's going where, what that constitutes. Now, obviously, when it comes to salary cap space, there's no definitive figure behind that. So we just have salary cap space at the moment, but we do know how many international players teams can field. So the standard before any trade was 10 players per team. And it's even been announced this week that the Toronto Arrows traded one of their foreign player slots to, I believe it's New England, for salary cap considerations. Mm-hmm. Now, even from like a fan perspective, I mean, like we're doing a podcast and we've always been asking like, oh, what's this trade for? Who's this trade for? And now this just answers so many questions. It seems to be a great step in the right direction from the league. And, it's great to keep up to date and know all this information so that you can have this level of transparency, which is what we've been asking for quite a few years from MLR. So it's great to that finally come into place.
Yeah, I was so excited when I saw this. Like you said, Stu, it's, we've been on this podcast for the past like couple of years now. And there has been moments where it's like a trade gets made and you look at all the comments that are on, the team's social media page, right? That are just like, well, what's the other half of the trade? Right. The trade is just like, this player is now going to be on this team, but you don't know when went back the other way. Right. It's like we were talking about that with the Hanko Hermesize a couple of weeks ago, in which we also were kind of looking at, well, there's a player that also signed with New York that was previously playing on LA. And we're like, is that the trade? We had no idea. And it's just, if you look at the transaction, the trade wire now, it's like, you can see that it's New York gave up salary cap, or sorry, LA gave up salary cap to New York for Hanko Hermesize. Right. And then I guess, the Giltinis players that ended up on New York after, I suppose is just the coincidental timing of them announcing a player signing during the same week, but it had nothing to do with the trade. But, I think part of it also is from like, I guess from our perspective now, like it opens up so much more because now we can all talk about the trades.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, like you can have podcast talk dedicating time to talking about your trades. You can have people writing articles about your trades. You can have, the Reddit boards and, Facebook groups and all that blowing up, talking about, who won the trade, like what you can get like a vibe on like what the fan base kind of thinks of each trade and stuff. It creates a more engaging like environment for the fans. And it's perfect. Like, it's like obviously every sports league in North America has this, right? And it's like, all the trades and stuff in the big leagues. I think it's amazing that they have included this. Really excited. It is also very interesting looking at the foreign player allocation and the foreign player slot. The one thing though that I do think is missing from it, although it is great to see, but it is also like so much salary cap dollars are moving around too, that and it is always listed as just a vague receive salary cap considerations in 2022, right? Yeah. And it's like I'm genuinely like, I've been going through the trade wire, and I think by looking at it, I'm like one, because it is vague, you don't actually know what that dollar amount is for the salary cap considerations, but also because of that, like I think looking at that as a fan, it's like you have no idea where the teams stand as far as salary cap, right? And you know what I mean? And it's which I suppose is fine. Like, hey, like if the league's not punishing teams for breaking the salary cap, I'm assuming everybody's complying with the salary cap. But that's, I think, maybe that comes next year, maybe that comes in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whenever. But I think that's kind of the next evolution of this. But maybe that's just another thing that comes down the road. I think what is kind of great about this, and the other thing that they added too, is like the match page on the website has stats for the games and stuff now too.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, again, another good thing to see. I think ultimately the vibe that I kind of get in seeing this is something that it's like, I know as fans, we've been like crying for it, and I feel like it's not that the MLR maybe doesn't want to do it, but it's like maybe there's cost in doing it. But it's just that there's cost in doing it properly, or there's cost in how they want to do it effectively and stuff. And I think it's like putting out these things like the new trade wire, starting to put stats from the game up on the website, up on their app. I guess the vibe that I got from the league this week in that buildup was that they're listening to the fans and how the fans want to engage in this league. I saw, like, even on Reddit, you can see a couple people trying to take stabs at creating like fantasy leagues. Which I think is something that fans do want. And stats to me is the first step at that. And obviously it's the same thing too, with, say, the partnership that the Euros have with CoolBet, right? If you go on CoolBet, it's like you can bet on the games.
Yeah.
And obviously that experience, right? Like right now it's mostly just like money line, who's going to win, who's going to lose type bets that you can make on CoolBet. Yeah. But it's like as the league kind of adds more stats, makes more stats available, that could open up like, more different types of things that you can engage with, like through like something like CoolBet. Like you can bet on like, how many meters is John Ryberg going to carry for in this game, right? And you can like have like an over under and something on that.
And that's something that'll obviously come with time, and as the stats develop. Sure. And as more information comes out. Absolutely. Right. Exactly. We got to talk about it. Unfortunately, we've put it off long enough. Let's talk about the Arrows. So before we get into the game itself, it was announced that Mike Shepherd has been named as captain for the 2022 season, with Sam Malcolm and Lucas Rumble named as the vice captains. But before the game even kicked off, we were given a long injury list. So we've got some guys that, now this all varies, some are month to month, some are day to day, some are week to week, but we'll go through it quickly. Cole Brown and Giuseppe Dutoit, their injuries are listed as month to month. Kobe Faust, Brandon Ferguson, and Denon Robinson Bartlett all have week to week injuries. And Matt Hood and the aforementioned vice captain Sam Malcolm are day to day injuries. That said, we had the Arrows team out in Torquilla to face the Seattle Seawolves, and didn't go the Arrows' way. Final score, Seattle 21, Toronto 8. Now, these are my thoughts on the game. I think that it was a case of death by penalties for Toronto. There was a lot of errors they made, a lot of easy concessions. They had the main strength was in the forwards pack as opposed to the backs. I think having Sam Malcolm injured is obviously a downside, but it just felt that, especially with Shepherd and Rumble, two guys leading in the forward pack, it seemed as though the backs had no coordination or no backup leadership to have, if that makes sense. So in the sense that there wasn't anyone in the backs that was properly coordinating. I think Ross Brody was trying as much as he could, but there were instances of missed passes that, with the centers and wingers just being in the wrong position, which then had either the ball going into touch or just being fumbled around. And then obviously the momentum starts to swing towards Seattle because they've pressed an advantage that shouldn't have happened, really. And Pete Smith was interviewed at halftime briefly, and we were saying that, the boys were angry at themselves for getting them into this situation. And, they conceded 10 points in the second half. They scored none themselves, although one of the incidents was an interception. And if the ball gets intercepted, of all the players, you don't want it to be Ross Neal, a guy with English Premiership experience. He's been playing for London Irish between seasons. If you're that good that you're called into the Premiership during the MLR off season, you don't want to be the guy that.
He's a good player. The one thing though I really did like about that play, and I mean, I know, obviously, tough
liking through gritted teeth and
dude. You know what? It's obviously not. Obviously, I don't like. Will Kelly. I think Ross Neal kind of read the play well. Picks off the Will Kelly pass, and Ross Neal's like gone, but Spencer Jones chasing him back the way he did, the line that he ran, like Neal has to run literally, doesn't just run to the try line. He runs all the way across the pitch too. He scores on the opposite side of the pitch as to where he caught the interception. Right. And then Alatimu misses the kick because of the line that Jones took, forced Neal. So it's like, if this game ended up being like, I mean, it ended up not being that close when it was all said and done. So much for my arrows by 15 prediction last week.
Oh well.
But honestly, on that play, like, I mean, it's interception stinks, but it's like, hey man, that effort from Spencer Jones like saved the team 2 points. It didn't end up mattering at the end, I guess, but you got to appreciate the effort even on a play like that. I think sometimes, as far as the rest of the game, I think the interesting thing to me is, so I mean, your two comments there, you're talking about the backs first, and I think like there was a lot of handling errors. There was a lot of passes that were behind guys that went, that ultimately, the ball went to the deck, or the ball went straight out of bounds, or the ball went to Ross Neal. Right. So obviously there's, a bit of a communication or a timing issue in the back line there, as they really just could not connect very well for a lot of the game. But I think, the other thing is too, though, is like, can you reread that injury list for me, Stu?
Absolutely. Through gritted teeth. Cole Brown, Giuseppe Dutoit, Kobe Faust, Brandon Ferguson, Matt Hood, Sam Malcolm, Denon Robinson Bartlett. These are all backs.
Yeah, they're all backs, right? And Brandon Ferguson was supposed to play in this game, and then he was a late scratch. Mitch Vorlek came in. Malcolm's probably a starter. Well, not probably a starter. Malcolm is a starter.
Yeah.
Right. Whether you want him, whether he starts at fly half, which I would have him do, and then maybe have like Mirez at fullback if everybody's healthy. But so Malcolm's at fly half. Sorry, so you have your potential starting fly half. Hood and Denon Bartlett might go on the wings. Right, Dutoit could play center. Like, you have a really, like, the injury list is a lot of backs, and they're all guys that could, in theory, start or could challenge for position. Depending on what Pete Smith feels, it'd be like, what Pete Smith feels would be his, everybody's available, no health issues, nothing preventing anybody from playing, what his ultimate back line would be, which I'm sure we'll find out at some point this season. But the injury list is all backs, and it's 7 backs. It's a full back line too. And, the backs ended up being who they were in this game. And yeah, there seemed to be like some miscommunications and just general, like, maybe perhaps is like first game kind of like timing errors in that. The other one, though, I find your second point kind of interesting, though, in saying like death by penalties, because the penalty count, like, when I personally think of a death by penalties thing, I'm looking at like the LA Houston game. LA had double the amount of penalties that Houston had. Right. And that was ultimately kind of their downfall. But I'm looking at the penalty count in this game, and it's like the Arrows had 12, Seattle had 10. Right. Like, I don't.
Where did they have those penalties? And it may have been a case of like, oh, this is just viewer bias. But it seems as though that any time that the Arrows seem to get any bit of momentum, it would either be a missed pass or it'd be a penalty, and then AJ would then kick it down into the opposition half, and then it would be a Seattle line out. And, you know, I will admit the forwards did do a lot of heavy lifting, especially in this game. Defensive effort was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that's definitely a positive.
You know, can't be faulted. Yeah, so that's the, and especially when you have a look at that long injury list, which I'm sure is going to get even longer because Andrew Ferguson was helped off the field. A number of Tommy De La Vega had a head knock and didn't return. It just seems
before you go on to, obviously Connor McCann, that was kind of a running into the collision with Matthews as a like that was a pretty scary incident, but it was great to see him walking off on his own power. So hopefully he's okay. But yeah, like I'm hopeful of that from the date, because they're as being listed as day to day, that Hood and Malcolm will be back next week, be able to go. I'm hopeful for that. But yeah, like, seeing Ferguson, certainly seeing McCann with how serious that looked in the moment. But again, good to see him walk off on his own. And De La Vega is also a concern because that's a very obviously a key player for the Arrows. So hopefully the injury list isn't too long next week either. But it was a tough game, a good physical game, and it took some guys for sure.
Yeah, well, it was a game that seemed to be decided by defense, and unfortunately for the Arrows, it seems that over the off season, Seattle has rebuilt their seawall and made it. I mean, they were obviously able to. It was good. Prevent a try being scored. Then again, the Arrows were able to prevent a try being scored as well. So
yeah, like I thought both teams, I thought their defense was really good. I mean, I think like you said, like from the Seattle perspective, I thought like obviously like guys like Landry and Hadding really brought it in defense. I thought like the way, I mean, obviously Neal had his interception try, but it was like kind of like the way that Neal and Iosefo were kind of coming off their wings. Was the way that Seattle utilized that, like that seemed to cause some issues, especially with, like, as we kind of mentioned, the backs earlier. That kind of seemed to cause some issues there. I think the flip side of it is that I think like the Arrows also played very well defensively. You know what I mean? You kind of look at this, the way that, I mean, this game played out. The Arrows, like there's only 3 tries, right? The the Arrows had one really well worked try to Fugga with a little kind of like not quite a one touch. It's a little bit more delayed than the little one touch, but it was a really nice play to get it to Richardson for his first try of the year. And obviously, Seattle had a line out that the Arrows defended the maul well. And then there was a lot of phases on the goal line that the Arrows were defending really well until Seattle eventually, kicked it out wide and Matthews scored. Right. But so it's like you had 2 really well worked tries from either team. And then one just, as we said, it's an 80-meter interception try, right? Which was like after Ross Neal caught the ball, as I mentioned, was probably defended about as well as you can defend that play after the interception already happens, because again, Spencer Jones kind of saved 2 points. But I think like obviously the defense, I think like obviously Rumball kind of balled out again. He had it warms my heart to see him getting breakdown steals. It kind of means after watching 5 MLR games previously, it doesn't really truly feel like the season starts until Lucas Rumball has a breakdown steal. That was good to see. I thought Quatrin I thought had like an immense game on defense too. Very involved, a lot of tackles, a lot at the rucks as well. Good in the line out. The line out too, speaking of Quatrin, I don't know what your thoughts on this. I thought the line out looked like really good, like improved on last year.
I mean, having Kyle Bailey in the line out,
Bailey
definitely helps. But yeah, especially compared to last year, the set piece as a whole,
it looked better.
is so much better. So that's great.
But I also even think that you remember like during COVID when the Arrows were doing that classics thing.
Yes.
Right. And Mike Shepard was on one. He was asked, what his role in the lineout was. And he joked that his role in the lineout was to not be in it.
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Well,
like,
not be jumping, not
yeah,
going up.
but like Shepard had some line out takes in this game.
Yeah.
Like he had his knees taped up with like the lifting pads and stuff. Right, he had his knees like, so like if he's adding that element to his game, you bring in Bailey, De La Vega's there. Like it seems like there's some options, if especially if Shepard's kind of evolving his game a little bit for that. That's another, that's a plus for the Arrows. And also going up against a good lineout too, like guys like I mean, I know Tucker had to leave the game early as well. But like Tucker and Hadding and Herbst or whatever, those are good guys that are pretty good at defending lineouts too. And I thought, it's like the Arrows did well at that. And newcomers like Salmon, I thought did well in the scrum too. Guy kind of looks like that guy's a monster. He looks huge, just like even by prop standards, like on the pitch, he looks huge. So that was good. Yeah, like I think
one Seattle player that I was glad to see, and I think a lot of Canadians are glad to see, is Nakai Penny putting in a full 80 minutes. I mean, and spent a lot of last season out injured.
Yeah.
And, especially with the big changes that have been happening at Seattle over the off season, there was always a question of like, will he be invited back? Thankfully he has, and he's been able to show what he's capable of, which is great to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy. There's so many good Canadian sevens in this league, right? Like, or Canadian flankers in general. When you look at like Penny, Heaton, Rumball, Michael Smith, Mo Abdelmanem had the he got the illustrious first breakdown steal in Dallas Jackals history, which I mean, which was great to see. I mean, I know the at that point in the game, 3 minutes in, Mo Abdelmanem's breakdown steal looked amazing, but unfortunately, that game didn't
go the way of the
Jackals way. Yeah, no, but
all right.
But
okay. Before we dive into talking about the other games that happened in MLR this weekend, do you have a Arrows man of the match that performed well?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I guess we'll talk about the other games. Like, I just want to say it's not fun to see all of those sevens, and it's fun to see them play against each other. So like Rumball versus Penny, that was a fun matchup to watch this week. Arrows man of the match, I think for this one, it's like I kind of have two thoughts. It's like I thought Richardson played really well, but I think obviously scoring the try, I think he made some good plays defensively too. I think though I want to give it to Jones. He did really well defensively, like in the middle of that back line. Kind of continued from what him and Lesage have been doing last year, and even in the brief 2020. I thought Jones, he was really good. He had some really strong carries, some good passes to help, to Fugga break the gain line himself. And obviously, like I kind of mentioned that, like not giving up on that Ross Neal intercept try, potentially saving 2 points, even though it didn't matter that much at the end of the game, but it's still something good to see. So I think I would give it to Spencer Jones for my Arrows man of the match this week. Who do you think, Stu?
I was gonna say I was quite impressed by Tafugga. I think especially when you're filling the shoes of Ben Lesage, who's been a stalwart for the Arrows for a couple of seasons, and you have to now try and fit into the game plan that has been established around Lesage, Jones, Mirez, Richardson. If you're able to slot in, and obviously he assisted with Richardson's try. I was quite impressed by him, and I'm looking forward to what else he can show as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think that was something that was nice to see with this game too. A lot of guys kind of making their debuts in MLR, and even professional rugby in general. Like I thought McCann played well until he unfortunately had to leave the game too. And even after that, Vorlek came in, not knowing that he's going to play. He handled himself pretty well in that situation as well. Like James O'Neal came into the game late, so it's like you got a lot of guys that got into their debuts. I liked Faleva had got the ball in his hands and like ran over a couple Seawolves. So like that was good to see, that kind of like ball carrying ability that he brings. So it's like I like your pick and stuff, but it's good to see, the kind of the new guys kind of coming in, making an impact. And I think, you know, it's obviously it's a tough loss. You got to look forward to next week with LA. I don't know. Is there anything like what do you think? Like looking at what LA kind of did this weekend, they obviously lost to Houston, and you know, anything that you what would you kind of want to see the Arrows kind of like focus on, or like what do you think's got to get cleaned up next week? Any lineup changes that you're looking for? The game obviously short turnaround, so
Yeah.
games on Friday, and knowing too, like we kind of talked about the injury list and stuff there, like obviously it's a short turnaround, so
Yeah.
could be an interesting lineup too, and but two teams be a matchup of two
Mm.
teams that probably have big aspirations for the year, and it did not start off the way they wanted to.
No. So if we're saying, for example, that De La Vega is unavailable through concussion, Andrew Ferguson's not available either. McCann was also out with concussion protocol as well. I'd say in that case, then I think Mason.
That's all assumptions, though. Like we haven't.
I know. I'm just saying
official reports or anything.
Yes, nothing. Because we're recording on Monday, nothing's come through as yet. But considering what we saw, if I was Pete Smith, I'd say, all right, we're going to give these guys a week off to ensure that they're fighting fit for the rest of the season. So I'd say maybe Flesh came on to replace De La Vega much earlier than he intended, and I think he did a great job. So I'd have Flesh in as one of the flankers. I'd then hopefully if Sam Malcolm is fit, I'd say have him as fullback because he's played most of his career at fullback. So I think, and then you have Kelly and Malcolm on the field, like going back to 2020 with having Malcolm and Adams doing like kicking duties, and like I think that would make a great option. Obviously, LA gave away a lot of penalties, and that will be what they're focusing on for the next week. But I think, but again,
one of those things LA's going to have to focus on this week. Yeah.
But I think if you can address what Houston did, which is focus on the set piece, make sure you're getting the ball moving. I was really frustrated with Houston, but I'll get onto that in a minute. But if you then have Kelly and Malcolm with those kicking options, maybe doing like crossfield kicks, exposing the defensive errors, I can see Toronto taking it if that's the case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, based on last week's performances, I think if Toronto plays the exact same way they did against Seattle and LA plays the exact same way they did against Houston, Toronto's going to win this game.
Yeah. So shall we get onto it? Shall we get onto the other games that we watched this weekend? Because so let's talk about the big one. We've already been dancing around it. LA, the defending champions, losing to the 12th place team of 2021, the Houston SaberCats. Final score: Houston 21, LA 11.
Yeah, wild game. I said last week that I thought this was the most intriguing game of the week, just because it's the champs versus, as much as we may still look at them as the Houston SaberCats team has finished last or, been a bottom feeder in the league for the past couple of years, right? It's a brand new team, and it would be interesting to see how the matchup plays out. And, good on Houston for coming away with this win.
Yeah.
Right. Like, first game with all these guys, like I said, it's basically a brand new squad. First game with all these guys kind of playing together. Good on them for coming away with this win. This is the worst game the LA Guiltinis have ever played.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I thought watching Houston in this game was very frustrating.
Because there were so many opportunities where you could have been kick at post. You have been in there 22 for 15 minutes. They don't have stop going for the try.
Well, that was my issue with it. Yeah. Right. It's like, I know at a certain point, I do agree with you. It's like kick for post and just take the points.
Yeah.
But the other part of me is you at one point in that game, at the end of that first half, LA was down a man for 14 straight minutes. 6 of those minutes they were down 2.
Yeah.
You
Nothing.
need to score a try.
Oh God, yeah.
You should score 2. Maybe you should probably score 2. You might be able to score 3 during that.
Yeah. My mentality when that happens is if you are down, if you have a 2-man advantage and you have a penalty in the 22, go for the posts, have them kick the ball back to you, and with the 2-man advantage, go again and try again. Because then at least you can say, at least we had points, which is what Houston can't say. And when they were in the opposition, I couldn't
say it at the half,
when they were in the opposition 15 opposition 22 for 15 minutes, and I was screaming, just kick it. And then eventually they scored the try, and then came the conversion. And after that conversion went wide, I was like, oh, that's why you're not kicking.
But that's the thing though. I honestly, I don't really have much of an issue with teams trying to score tries first. It's like, I think there's moments of every in most of the games this week where you kind of looked at it, it's like, oh, you're passing up points to go for a try. I think when teams do that, to be honest, I think there's, watching the Utah Austin playoff race last year, I think has kind of changed my perspective on this a little bit, where it's kind of like obviously you want to win the battles, but your goal is to win the war.
Yeah.
Right. And scoring tries at the end of the day helps you win the war, right? Because it's like the league as a whole, big picture, if you're looking at the entire season, obviously you want to win the game that you're currently playing, but the entire season is the league standings reward tries. It doesn't reward penalties, right? So it's like, I understand. And you watch the, Utah and Austin, who had similar records prior to Austin who had similar records on the day that Austin was mathematically eliminated from the playoffs because Utah scores tries and Austin did not. They went out and got some guys that can score tries and scored tries this week. So perhaps Austin might be a team to be reckoned with this year if they can score. But that's the way the standings works, right? You score tries. So I understand teams wanting to score tries in those situations. But I just can't help but look at Houston and be like, a better team with the way that LA played, the amount of penalties that there's LA, it's like, you can look at that and be like, LA's playing good defense. And I think everybody, you might not like it, but everybody takes that trade of taking so many penalties that you go down 2 guys. But if you told me that you could go down 2 guys and just keep constantly taking penalties, and after 15 minutes, you'd come away with not allowing any points, everybody takes that trade because you didn't give up any points. Right. But I think if you look at that, the way LA played, I think a better team buries LA in that situation. Absolutely. And I think perhaps even Houston on a better day, maybe if this is later in the season and that team has more time to gel, perhaps Houston on a better day buries LA in that too. Yeah. I don't think either team played all that well in this game.
There was a tweet by Brian Ray talking about this weekend and saying that he feels as though every team should have had another week of preseason just to iron out the crack.
Well, I mean, that goes back to our theme for the past couple of weeks. So the MLR needs to do preseason better, because it's like the first games always kind of feel like that kind of vibe to it. But I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I think it's interesting to kind of see LA kind of start the season with the worst game they've ever played. But at the same time, Houston didn't do anything in this game that makes me nervous or makes me scared of Houston either. They rarely ever got quick ball. Smith, I thought his service the whole game was really slow. The one time it wasn't was when Brits kind of just moved him out of the way and took the ball himself and scored a try. That was the one time they had quick ball. But all right. As far as though, not a whole lot of Lesage had a huge line break to set up Germishai's try. So that was a great little Canadian moment in that game too. Around the league, aside from
let's talk about a few other games, not just devoting to Houston and LA.
It's the most interesting game of the week, but
it was. But let's try another. Let's talk about the first game of the season, ATL versus DC. And this started out as a close contest, and then in the second half, ATL just hit the accelerator pedal on their steamroller and just rolled over DC. Yeah. I mean, De La Vega Mendia seems to be in a great addition for Rugby ATL. Obviously, like Matt Heaton and Connor Keys, great to see them back in the squad. And for DC, I think Danny Tusitala is coming into his role as captain really well. He scored the first try for his team as well. And I think Doug Fraser was fantastic on the wing, coming in sometimes as like a wing center option when available. We obviously guests on the show, we're obviously big fans of him, but no, it was actually really good to see him out there performing.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Fraser played really well. He was able to gain plenty of meters every time he touched the ball, seemed to be making something positive happen. And like you said, kind of had some good plays on defense as well. Matt Heaton played like Matt Heaton, which is just great to see. We kind of talked about some of the great sevens that are in the league a little bit earlier, so that's obviously excellent to see too. Keys good as well. Like I said, I think DC might struggle this year, and this game didn't really do anything to kind of ease my concern about the squad. But good on Rugby ATL too, man. Like, I mean, we talked about, all kind of the off-season stuff or all the behind the scenes off pitch, things that this squad is kind of dealing with. So good on them for coming out and putting up a big number in their opening week too.
Yeah. And unfortunately, because of the timing schedules of three of the games on Saturdays, like the Austin Dallas game started, and then an hour later Houston LA started whilst that was still ongoing, and then the NOLA New England game started an hour after Houston LA's kickoff. So I was there going from like one game as soon as the hydration break occurred. I was like, okay, which game are we going to now?
I was just say,
that one.
I should have taken a picture of it. I got my laptop. I have a second monitor hooked up to my laptop. I had a tablet and I had like a TV just to kind of try.
Someone's prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Preparations and stuff. And then like I could look at I could have turned my phone on too. Like just from where we're recording the podcast, what I'm looking at right now, I can see like 6 screens or whatever. And
you're basically like one of those bankers on like the stock market, just like
but it's
all rugby. So
it's just rugby stuff. It's just rugby stuff. And then, okay, we'll just redo it. Yeah. So, and obviously, so New England, NOLA, pretty important kind of Canadian content game here. Eric Howard, obviously, he scored a try. Just him and Mitch Richardson, as far as Canadians finding their way across the whitewash this week. And, Foster Dewitt making his MLR debut wearing the number 1 jersey. He played like 76 minutes in this game. So as a front rower making your MLR debut, outstanding. That's just outstanding. So good on him. New England coming away 24-13 with a 24-13 victory. And so that's that was a great game to see. And then the weekend kind of wrapped up with San Diego beating Utah. Or I guess the weekend didn't wrap up. The weekend wrapped up with the Arrows game. San Diego beating Utah 31-29. As you said, Emerson Pryor, draft pick on the bench, but did not play. And Michael Smith came off the bench for San Diego late in the game too.
Well, speaking of San Diego, they have been making moves in the off season. And if Legion fans weren't happy about them being at a car park for this season, I think they'll be pretty happy with the news that has come out that they will be moving to Snapdragon Stadium for the 2023 season. Now, the stadium's currently being built. It's hoping to be finalized by September of 2022. So obviously after the MLR season and in time for football season for San Diego State University. And that means there'll be no conflict between football schedule or soccer schedules and the MLR schedule. So he's hoping, fingers crossed, that they'll have rugby lines on the field, but that is yet to be seen. From the videos I've seen of Snapdragon Stadium in the planning phase, looks fantastic. It's a 30,000 seater stadium. Maybe a bit too big for MLR at the moment, but obviously there's room for growth there. And the stadium itself has the option to be expanded for 55,000 seats, which, will be aimed for the university football crowd. But, maybe one day it can be packed out with Legion fans and visitors coming to see an MLR game.
Is Snapdragon Stadium the best stadium name in the league now?
I'm still a fan of York Lions, but
York Lions Stadium.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going to be technical about it, it'll be possibly one of the best names for the next season stadium. But that is
Silverback Park is pretty cool, or Silverback Stadium. It's the new one.
Yeah,
I know that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, that one looks pretty good. And but yeah, we'll discuss names at a different time. Okay, we're going to talk about where you can be watching rugby this coming week, because remember, the first MLR match of this week is on a Thursday, and you can watch all MLR games that don't feature the Arrows on the Rugby Network. Also on the Rugby Network is Japan League One. If you're looking for any of the Premiership and URC games that have been playing during the international window, those will be on Sportsnet. And obviously, I just mentioned the international window. That's because the Six Nations is happening, and you can watch that on DAZN. And if you are looking to watch the Arrows versus LA in BC this week, it will be on Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on tsn.ca. Okay, we're nearly at the end of the podcast. I think this is the perfect time for us to do our predictions. So, Derek, you had a pretty good start to the season.
You did not. Not at all.
Yep, I am aware of that.
Yeah.
But of course, we now have a better understanding of how teams are performing. Now we're in the proper season. We've also got New York back into the fray after having that round one bye. So the first game up is that Thursday fixture. Yeah, we talk about the Arrows having a short turnaround. Seattle, whoa.
Yeah,
at least they're playing at home.
Just a couple of days. I know it's kind of one of those weird things where it's like I kind of like having the midweek games. I think it'll be fun, but that's a quick turnaround for the boys here. But hey, man, if NFL players can do it Sunday to Thursday, then I think the MLR can pull it off too.
Okay, so do you think it'll be Seattle or do you think it'll be Utah?
Who's at home? Seattle?
It's all Seattle.
You know what? I might have some fun. Let's see if the seawall holds up to the best, one of the best offenses in the league last year, just for fun. Why not? Let's go Seattle.
Okay, I am gonna have to agree with you. I think whilst Utah put in a good performance, but it's always been the case of defense wins championships, and it'll be the thing that wins match. And how do you win championships? You have to win matches. So I think Seattle will, obviously being a short turnaround doesn't help, but being at home definitely does. So, okay, let's move out a little bit north to BC. So we have Toronto versus LA. This is interesting thing I've realized is that Toronto have played LA twice now, and neither game would have been in Toronto or LA.
No.
LA have a lot of penalties they need to work on. Toronto have a lot of communication, especially in the back, that they need to work on for this week. But I think the close proximity, being in Canada as well, I'm going to go with Toronto.
Yeah, I'm just going to LA did not look good at all last week. I think even though Toronto lost, I think there's a lot more positives they can take out of it. And kind of like you said, like the Arrows, I don't think they're going to lose in Canada.
Okay.
This year. So. Yeah, just straight up, I don't think they're going to lose in Canada.
Okay, now we have San Diego versus Dallas, and this will be at the Legion's new ground. So, Derek, who are you going with?
Oh, San Diego.
I don't want to be boring, but I'm having to go with San Diego as well. I mean,
it's the unfortunate. Dallas. I mean, it's the expansion team, and I just there wasn't a big confidence building game. Losing by, what did they lose by? 30 plus points, right?
Yeah, it's 34 points was the difference.
And San Diego kind of coming off of that, still playing at home, and they beat a playoff team last week, right? In a bit of a shootout too. right? So it's like they kind of beat Utah the way Utah wants to play rugby too. So
okay, so we have Austin versus DC, and this may be another one that we're in agreement on. DC, they're plucky, but they're not really showing me anything to be confident in at the moment. I know that this will be technically the Cuisine Solutions Cup, and they won both fixtures so far, one in 2020 and the other in 2021. But Austin just seems to be the stronger team at the moment. I'm going with Austin.
Yeah, you got to go Austin.
All right, now we're getting into a bit of like the gray area now, because while we have Houston that put in that performance against LA, we also have New York as well, who had that round one bye. So do you think that Houston is more raring to go, or do you think that New York got that extra week of preseason under their belt and they're going to be hitting the ground running?
Yeah, I think New York. I like New York to take this game. I think their squad looks really good, and kind of like I said, Meg. I mean, good on Houston for getting that win last night or on the weekend, but they also didn't do a whole lot to scare me either. Right. So I think I'm going to stick with New York.
Okay. For the sake of not making this just the same thing for both of us, I'm going to go with Houston. I think they've been able to identify the errors that they made in that game, and like the failure to capitalize on penalties, especially when they were 2 men up.
Yeah.
Maybe work on their kicking accuracy as well. So I'll go with Houston for this time. And now we have one of the highly anticipated games of this season. I mean, last year it was one of the lowest scoring, but an absolute thriller. And that is Nola Gold versus Rugby ATL. And from what I've seen so far, ATL putting that dominant performance against DC.
I'm telling you right now, I'm just picking the team that you don't pick.
All right, then I will have the visitors take it. I will go with ATL.
All right, Nola it is. And even as I'm sitting here, I'm tempted to change that Seattle pick to Utah because I don't like agreeing with you.
I'm not Dan, for crying out loud. Come on.
Oh my God, yeah. But you did lose to the Toonie, right? So
I did lose. I think we all lost to the Toonie one time or another last season.
Yeah.
And
the most.
And for you eagle-eyed or sharp-eared listeners, you'll notice that we haven't given the Toonie predictions on this episode, and that is because you can find them on our TikTok account. That's tiktok.com/@theRougeRugby. And you can actually find us across all social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @theRougeRugby. And if you've enjoyed listening to this episode, you can listen to previous episodes on Anchor FM, Spotify. And if you've enjoyed watching our faces, you can also see past episodes on YouTube, again, @theRougeRugby. And if you are watching this episode, you can see where our personal social media platforms are. But if you're listening, Derek, where can they find you?
At Brissette the Jet across everything, and I'm very proud of you for trying to convince people to go look at this TikTok of you flipping a coin to determine who's going to win rugby matches, and then I hope you also add your sad expression when the Toonie inevitably beats you next week. You have to do the follow-up video on Monday.
Terrible.
No, it's going to be good content, man. It's like a Toonie.
Okay, Boomer
is better at picking rugby matches than we will. It's fine.
Anyway, if you want to see that video of expression, you can find me on my social media platforms on Twitter and Instagram @Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's it for this.
Also, let us know who you picked this week so Stu can know that he lost to more people.
You can also email us to have Derek stop interrupting me at therougerugbypodcast@gmail.com. Well, that's where we're going to end it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you can join us for the next one.